Hello here and welcome again to another edition of the Husker Online Show. It is the spring football preview edition. Robin Washett is away doing Robin Washett basketball things. So Steve Sipple and I will carry the show as we get you ready for the start of spring practice. This is spring break week in Lincoln. Coaches, players off, and then everybody will get back to work starting Sunday and Monday with the opening practice on March 20th. They're going to practice 4 days that opening week. So you get 15 practices. They're going to get 4 of them done in week 1 and kind of lay the foundation. Then the week of Easter, which is I believe the 9th this year, they're only going to practice twice that week. They're going to take the Saturday off of Easter weekend. So they're going to do one of those days on week 1, kind of lay the foundation. But here we go. It's hard to believe we're through kind of this long winter and spring practice starting on Monday.
Yeah. I mean, it'll be interesting to see what it looks like, although we don't see a lot, right? We don't. And
we're going to get some access.
Are we going to get some?
Yeah.
We're going to get a lot of interview access for sure. What have you heard in terms of
there'll be photo days? And I think that's what people got to understand. Like, access means like you get to come in for the beginning. And it typically a way a practice is set up is you go through stretching, warm-ups, and then individuals and special teams is kind of like the latest we'd get a stay. Individuals, like when the D linemen go with the D line coach and they'll work for like 15 minutes. Mm-hmm. And then they might do like PAT, field goal. We could potentially, over the years, that would be as good as it gets. Now, when they start doing inside run, 7-on-7, team offense, we're out of there.
Not all the time. Over the years, if you say over the years, that's as good as it gets. No, I mean, we used to see Bill Callahan, we saw every practice, right?
His first fall camp in 2004, every practice was open.
Right. Riley, we saw some spring practices. I don't know. I can't remember Pelini if we did. If you go back to Osborne, you saw all the scrimmages, like every scrimmage. You know how many
Solich too.
You know how many NCAA tournament games I missed on Saturdays covering 200 play scrimmages?
Oh,
now we don't get that, and I almost hate to say that because people will be like, "Well, how do you know what you're writing about?" Yeah, you tap into your sources. It was a lot better. I don't mind saying when you could watch a 200 play scrimmage, you knew everything about the team. You can learn a lot watching that. Now, maybe Matt Rule would let us do that. I don't know if you can do that in this day and age.
Yeah, I mean, besides the red-white spring game, there generally are 2 major scrimmages in the spring, an early one and kind of a later one. And those are, if you could pick any practices to go to, those would be the ones. And then obviously in August, they're going to do about 2 more of those in August. And those are kind of simulation games. I mean, there's 4 scrimmages that develop your football team, usually 2 in the spring, 2 in the fall.
Yeah. So people probably wonder, Sean, why don't they let you watch them anymore? Well, it's a different world now.
Control. I mean,
well, it's not that so much. Yeah, it is that because it's harder to control. I don't know how many people you think would go to practice. 35 media members, 40.
Yeah. And I mean,
back then it was 5 or 6 during the Osborne Solich era. You're talking about 5 or 6 people,
and you could say, "Oh, limit it." Well, it gets challenging to limit
to certain media members.
Yeah.
How do you draw the line?
Or are you like number of people per outlet? Well, like, so if we could only have one, like I think you and I would literally fight.
Yeah, we would get in a fist fight
to go to practice.
We would fight, and you know who would win that, Sean?
South Omaha, always over Columbus.
No.
You were a boxer. I'm a Taekwondo black belt. It'd be a hell of a battle.
Yeah, it would.
Yeah. It'd be a hell of a battle.
Yeah, it would. But they would probably give us 2, and then we'd have to fight Robin. Although maybe Robin wouldn't want to go that bad.
No, Robin would be cool. Yeah. Well, Robin would understand. Abby would want to go, though.
Abby, we're not fighting Abby.
Greg Peterson would want to go. So, yeah, so you have to decide how you want to do it and the parameters. I mean, there was a year when under Riley it was open, and I remember there were 2 fields, and there were some younger reporters that stood in the middle of 2 fields. And this one young guy who clearly had never been to a football practice before had his back to a play going on the other field, in between the 2 fields, and just gets smoked.
Got smoked
in the back.
See the potential for problems on that.
it was really hard to get Mike Riley mad. That was probably one of 2 times I saw Mike Riley pissed. 2. The other time was at another spring practice where he laid into the team afterwards. Remember that?
Yeah.
It was almost freaky.
Oh, it was. You're right.
And that's you get to see that kind of stuff.
Exactly.
And sometimes they don't want you to see how the sausage is getting made.
Right.
Because there's a lot of people that don't know how to handle that information.
Right. I'm not really critical of coaches. I've said this before. I wouldn't let any media in my practices ever if I were a head coach. They wouldn't be within 250 yards of my practices. So I'm not critical of the coaches. I fully understand, but I do wish we could see the practice.
Some of my favorite seeing spring practice memories, I'll never forget Harrison Beck. Bill Callahan liked to let the quarterbacks go live. I mean, they would take the green jerseys off. Zach Taylor was sacked 8 times in a scrimmage by Jay Moore and Carricker. I mean, literally sacked.
Yeah, I remember he came to us and he was bleeding from the nose. And
so the next spring he was already established. So Callahan let him keep the green jersey. They took the green off Harrison Beck, and Adam Carricker was going to sack Harrison Beck, just pummel him.
Yeah.
And Harrison Beck faked a hamstring injury.
Yes, he did. That's right.
To avoid the sack. And it was a smart. And all of a sudden, Carricker's coming, and he goes, like a sniper shot him in the back or something. And just,
I think he feigned it. Yeah, he feigned it. He didn't really pull it. He feigned it.
He's like, oh. And so, you get to see stuff like that. I remember we got to see Roy Halou kind of come out a little bit. You see some things in spring at those scrimmages that you really need to do your job right.
Is it possible that Harrison pulled his hamstring on that?
He didn't pull his hamstring.
Are you sure about that? He might have popped it.
No, I mean, he played in the spring game. Then the night before the red-white game, he was in a rock band.
Yeah.
And he played Friday. He played Friday night before the red-white spring game.
Played downtown. It was a good band. Good band.
You went to the show?
No, I heard about it.
I remember Channel 8 did this huge thing. Then he had to play the spring game the next day.
Yeah.
He was an interesting guy. But you're listening here to the Husker Online show. So spring practice will start up and lots to delve into as we get into this spring football preview show. We're going to talk offensive storylines, defensive storylines. We'll take questions. And we're going to talk some Big Ten spring as well, as this is going to be a spring football focus show. But I'm just more intrigued about Rule. I mean, just how he is getting back into the college game after his time in the pros and just what his version of Nebraska is going to look like.
Yeah, I don't know, but what it's looked like to a certain degree up to now, which is much more crucial when they practice, as he's been very accessible, as we've talked about a lot, but he's accessible, pretty transparent. It's kind of fun. It's fun so far. He did say the other day, there's nothing more important than practice. Nothing. That's the most critical word in his football vocabulary is practice. Allen Iverson is coming to mind right now, but I thought that was interesting, and I totally understand why. But yeah, what the Matt Rule team is going to look like, what's the feel, what's the overall program going to look like? We're getting an idea, but man, we still have a lot of questions. I mean, how much are they going to use the fullback? Are they going? Or
is that just kind of a novelty?
Didn't sound like it when Marcus Satterfield talked about it during his press appearance, his news conference appearance in January. It sounded like more than a novelty to me. The fact that they're not going to huddle, that's not or they're going to huddle. That didn't sound like a novelty. That sounds like,
But is the fullback 5 or 10 snaps a game, or is it going to be half the offense?
Right. That's a good question. We don't know that, right?
And I can't imagine it being half the off. I think it's going to be a situational guy they use.
Like an H-back.
Like a Swiss Army knife player.
Yeah. Could be. I mean, we could be wrong. You could be wrong. That's the kind of thing we're going to learn, right?
After Janovich, Luke McNitt was the last good fullback Nebraska's had. And McNitt, he had a cup of coffee in the NFL. Yeah. He was all right too. But
that's going back a ways.
That was on the Tanner Lee team.
Yeah, going back a little ways.
Mike Riley. I mean, Mike Riley used a fullback.
Yeah, McNitt was legit. His
family used to come to the Husker lunches out in Kearney.
Yeah, in Kearney. Is he from Kearney?
Yeah, he's coaching too. He's I want to say he's at Arizona, like Division I. I mean,
is that right?
Yeah, he's been doing lots. I mean, he's done coaching now.
Good for him.
Done playing and he's working on coaching. But all right, when we come back, we're going to talk offensive storylines to watch here as we break down what you'll want to know here heading into the spring. You're listening here to the Husker Online Show. And we're back here on the Husker Online Show. Sean Callahan, Steve Sipple, as we talk spring practice, offensive storylines. And let's get right into it, Sip. Let's talk quarterbacks. I think obviously Casey Thompson coming off the shoulder injury, it's going to be hard to really evaluate much of him this spring. Maybe he'll throw a little here and there, but he's going to be fairly limited. So yes, it's going to be a big spring for Jeff Sims, the Georgia Tech transfer. But what about Logan Smothers? What about Richard Torres, Heinrich Haarberg, Chubba Purdy? There are 4 other scholarship quarterbacks besides Jeff Sims. And, I think one of the biggest questions, we know who the top 2 probably are. It's Thompson, Sims, pick your poison. But who's the third guy?
I don't pretend to know that.
Nobody knows.
Right. Heinrich Haarberg seems to have captured the imagination of the coaching staff. They mention Heinrich a lot. They don't mention Logan much. It's almost like Logan, I don't know, it's almost like they forgot about him. You just don't hear his name very much. Chubba, you heard it the other day when Matt Rule said that Chubba Purdy and Heinrich Haarberg are among the fastest players on the team in terms of miles per hour. And Heinrich has drawn praise on 2 or 3 occasions. So it kind of leads me to believe that Heinrich maybe has the inside track to number 3.
Isn't it bizarre? Like under Mark Whipple, like literally he thought he wanted nothing to do with Logan, Haarberg, or even Torres. And then he propped up Sinek, and Sinek's already gone.
Yeah, it's sort of bizarre.
That's how politics work.
Well,
you pick your people, and that your guys. Chubba was his guy. Casey was kind of his guy.
Yeah, I'd bite back a little bit on that, Sean. I don't think it's all politics. They size up guys, and some of it's just personal.
You can't tell me Sinek is more talented than those other guys.
Well, I mean, here's the thing, though, Sean. Those guys are watching film every single day of every snap. So if I'm a coach and I'm hearing journalists say, you can't tell me this or that, what do you mean? I mean, I would say, well, how much have you seen of our practice?
Well, I've seen him coming up the ranks and watched him.
Right.
I know the arm talent Torres has, and obviously Smothers, we know the athletic ability. They could have drummed up a better game plan to work for Smothers, but he didn't want to do that.
Right.
Like if Steve Cooper would have taken over the offense from Mark Whipple, when Mark Whipple barely could even handle himself on the sidelines, the offense would have looked a lot different. But we got the Casey Thompson games to Trey Palmer, and that was kind of what captured our imagination of the offense. But other than that offense last year was nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, it wouldn't have mattered.
Probably. But yeah, as far as who that number 3 is, hard to say. Except it seems like
Haarberg's getting some steam.
Yeah. Which now, again, it would be nice to see the practices and see what that looks like and not just go on our feeling or what we hear. It'll come down to that largely. But I'm come on, let's face it. Sims can make a big statement this spring because he's going to get a big opportunity. He's going to be with the ones most of the time. Casey's not. I mean, people wonder about Casey. I doubt you'll see Casey in a team setting taking snaps with the offense. He'll be able to throw at some point according to rule, but is he going to put him out there under center or behind center and actually have him run the team? I don't think you're going to see that. And then Casey, so June becomes very important for Casey.
All right, moving down, let's look at running backs, and Megan's got it pulled up here for us. This is the scholarship distribution chart here on the site.
Oh, thank you, Megan.
You look at that group. I mean, running back, fairly loaded group. I mean,
it's the best position on offense,
top to bottom. I mean,
it is,
because you could make a case for at least 4 of those guys: Anthony Grant, AJ Allen, Gabe Irvin. All of those guys, and Ramir Johnson. There are 4 guys there that have started games at Nebraska.
Absolutely. That, again, I just reiterate, running back is the best position group on offense. Secondary is the best position group on defense. That is a good group of running backs any way you shake it. Grant's proven 900-plus yards last year. A.J. Allen was headed towards a good year, got waylaid against Oklahoma by an injury. Gabe Irvin Jr. I mean, I think he just needs snaps.
His leadership skills are great.
Yeah, he loves the game. And Ramir is a proven player. He got caught in between positions. It was one of the coaches. One thing that coaches do sometimes is just misuse talent. They put guys at wrong positions. And in Ramir's case, they had him trying to kind of play slot guy and running back. And I would counsel any kid out there that if your coach comes to you and says, we kind of want you to try to play both, 2 positions, I'd say no. No, I'm not playing 2. Put me at 1. Decide which one. I'll help you decide if you want me to.
It's like being a columnist and a beat writer together. It's hard to do. You've done it before.
Yeah. But everybody would prefer just give me an assignment and I'll do that. And Ramir Johnson, he just got lost in the shuffle.
And then AJ Allen coming back off his collarbone injury. That's one he should be fully recovered from. Like that's not a knee.
He was Oklahoma, yeah. A long time ago.
They were able to keep the 4-game red shirt on him. So that's going to be fun to watch because you're going to have a lot of new eyeballs on these backs that have never worked with these guys before.
Oh, absolutely. AJ Allen, you wonder if he can just win the job, just flat win the job. He had moved to a point last year, Sean, where I thought he was on even terms with Anthony Grant. Then the injury, his shoulder popped. Yeah. So I don't know. I think I'd watch that one pretty closely.
All right, let's look at the receiver SIP. As you scroll down here and look at these guys at receiver, I think that group of seniors there, Marcus Washington, Josh Fleeks, Billy Kemp. I mean, if you were to say starters, like those 3 guys are probably the starting group. Alante Brown not here, but could be back in the summer. I know he's working to get back here. He's got a situation that's not football related that he's getting sorted out to get back. Isaiah Garcia Castaneda is back after he things went south with him and the previous staff, but now he's back with Matt Rule. Then you got Xavier Betts, who's had a really, really good spring, winter. So like all of those guys, I think could be a factor.
It's pretty good. That's a pretty good group now.
Sean Hardy, I don't see him being a factor. Victor Jones, we don't know much about him. I mean, and then Janiron Bonner, is he, we don't know much about him. And he had that gruesome leg injury, redshirted last year. Yeah. Then you've got 6 freshmen, and none of those guys are here right now in that freshman group.
Right. So you're right. Marcus Washington, Josh Fleeks, Billy Kemp, they could easily be your starters, but it's not hands down. Garcia Castaneda could push for that. Betts could push for that. So, but those would be the main guys. I think you'd like to be a little deeper there. I mean,
well, look at those freshmen. Can one of those guys like Malachi Coleman or Jaden Doss, can somebody like that get some snaps next year? I mean,
those are the 2 that you'd bet on, right?
Right.
Malachi Coleman, Jaden Doss.
Demetrius Bell's pretty good too. I mean, Jeremiah Charles and Jalen Lloyd and Bryce Turner. I look at them as more developmental guys that you got to develop. I mean, they all have speed and other intangibles, but they need a little bit more development.
Well, I'll tell you what too. I mean, as you sit here in your comfortable chair and it's March 9th and we talk about maybe a freshman playing, it sounds nice and comfortable, but it's not when you put him out there against Michigan, and Michigan's early. I mean, you put him out there, under the lights at Minnesota. You don't want a guy who you're not sure about. I mean, if you're trying to win the game at Minnesota, you can't have guys that you're not quite sure about. But sometimes you got to go that way. But man, I mean, Marcus Washington, critical. Fleeks is about your age, Sean. He's critical. Billy Kemp, critical. Those guys are proven. Garcia Castaneda is a man. He's a grown man. I mean, that's the guys you need out there.
All right, tight end. You look at that group. I think it's Fedoni with Arik Gilbert being the wild card. We don't really know Chris Hickman's status. That wasn't updated by Matt Rule.
Is he still on the roster?
He's still listed on the roster, so he hasn't been doing winter conditioning to my knowledge. AJ Rollins, James Carney, Brody Tagaloa, Chase Androff. Can those guys though? Then you've got Borkature.
Yeah, thank you for
listed as a walk-on.
Yeah. He's very proven. Brody Tagaloa will not be involved in spring drills because of injury.
God, he's been hurt now 2 years in a row.
Yeah, he's out,
and he was hurt as a senior in high school. Just so you know.
Okay, he's out. He's the only. Oh, I guess Teddy Prohaska and Brody Tagaloa are the only offensive players that we know that are out. Elbow injury on Tagaloa. That's a good group of tight ends.
As long as Fedoni peaks right.
Yeah, and we'll see what they get out of Gilbert. I mean, those guys are big time talents. They are both kind of, God, I hate to say it, but they're both kind of wild cards. But man, if you go to Minneapolis for that first game, and Fedoni and Gilbert are your top 2 tight ends.
Hello.
Yeah, that's big time, man.
And they potentially each could have 3 years at Nebraska.
Oh, man.
I mean, and who knows if they peak right, they might only be here 2, but you're going to get these guys for 2 to 3 years each.
Yeah, I don't know what Gilbert brings exactly, except at LSU in 2020, he caught 35 passes for 489
in a shortened season
for 389 yards. Yeah, but they liked him.
He was freshman All-American.
Yeah, SEC, yeah.
So when he transferred to Georgia, he was a 3rd-team preseason All-American.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I mean.
He's a big-time talent.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I know, Bill Bush coached him at LSU, and he said the coaches there were like, this guy does things naturally, like some guys few guys we've ever seen. So that's a big-time talent if you can get him going. Fedoni the same way. Fedoni could be a big-time field stretcher. I mean, that's why I see Fedoni with his speed and size. I mean, hitting him up the seam a lot. He'll be a handful.
And then finally, offensive line as we move down, kind of previewing that line. Prohaska out for the spring. We know that. But looking at that group, what's Benhart's role? What's Corcoran's role? Where's Piper at? Is Newellen back at left guard? Ben Scott, is he a center like we thought coming in? Latosky. I mean, they've got a core of guys there. Gunnar Gatula is here as a true freshman as well. But, there's just a lot of interesting things there at that offensive line. But without Prohaska, it's very incomplete picture right now.
It is. It's the same guys, generally speaking, that we talk about all the time, except, as you mentioned, Ben Scott, the ASU transfer, who we figured was earmarked for center, although that was that notion was cooled a little bit by Donovan Raiola recently, who said Scott could play anywhere on the line. And if you think about it, Sean, I mean, he started 13 games at right tackle at Arizona State a couple of years ago. He could help you at tackle. The guy that really intrigues me is Justin Jenkins. Can Justin Jenkins make a move in those, at the center position is what I'm guessing where you'd see him. Just a kid.
I've heard nothing though that would lead me to believe he's a factor. You got something there that leads you to believe that we should be watching him?
No, but I don't have anything that leads me to believe we shouldn't. I don't know that how people ask about him. I mean, sometimes it's just a matter of someone asking about a kid, and there you go. There's his name. It's out there. But I don't think anybody asks about Justin Jenkins. I like his physicalness. I know he's small, but he's a center. He's short in stature.
Well, and Raiola is so closed on stuff. He's not going to offer out much.
Yeah. So I don't know. I'm just interested in him. And we don't know what that line is going to look like, but we do know the principles. That's the thing. We know these guys have been around now 3 and 4 years. We know them really well.
All right. When we come back, we're going to talk defensive storylines. You're listening here to the Husker Online Show. And welcome back here to the Husker Online Show. Sean Callahan, Steve Sipple. Let's talk defensive storylines. That was a great conversation, Sip, on the offense. As we covered a lot of ground there. I think my biggest question still at the offense is how these positions will be defined under Tony White.
Oh, defense.
When we talk about the defense, you just go down and kind of look at just the D-line. And I still have the scholarship distribution chart as the previous staff. So, what's a D lineman? What's an edge? Is there nickels? How will they kind of define roles? But I think let's start D line.
Yeah, start with the D line.
And let's call it 280 plus pound bodies. And that's
light on numbers too.
And
look at it. I mean, just look at the chart, Sean.
We're banking on Stephon Wynn Jr., Nash Hutmacher. Ty Robinson's out for the spring. The transfer Elijah Judy, a Philadelphia kid who is tough, but he hadn't played at A&M. Ed Foley really spoke highly of him at St. Michael's that night. Said he's a neighborhood kid. He's a tough Philly kid.
Elijah Judy.
So they're excited about him. But Ruquan Buckley, kind of an unknown.
Unknown.
Cameron Lenhart is here right now, so that's a promising sign that you'll get some reps with him in spring ball. But that freshman group, I like Van Poppel. He's just he's not here. Carroll Jackson potential, Lafatu potential. You don't know what those guys have. I mean, they really might have to go to the portal for one more, rent a player almost.
Absolutely,
like
Sean.
Stefan Wynn / what's Devin Drew last
Devin Drew
year.
Gone, yeah. So now here's the deal. When I look at this chart, what I wonder about is, now they're talking about like a real football game for the spring game. Those numbers are awfully light for that, Sean. Tell me I'm wrong.
Yeah, there's just not a lot there to work with.
No, unless they have some. Are they thinking of moving somebody? I don't know. It's not like they're loaded down with offensive linemen to move either. So, I mean, look at how light that is. Hutmacher has a lot to prove. Ben Jr. was sufficient last year, I would say.
He was sufficient. I mean, he is what he is. Like they basically got a guy that could give them quality snaps, and he did. I mean, there were a couple moments where he made plays, but it wasn't like he changed games.
No. Robinson, again, he's not participating this spring. So it's, again, light. Ruquan Buckley flat told me last summer he wasn't ready. Now, hopefully he got himself ready, right? Buckley just said, I'm not ready to play yet. Now, that was a year ago. So hopefully over the course of a year, he's gotten himself ready to roll.
Yeah, and we both were on a high horse about the Colton Feast leaving was a big deal. And we
were on a high horse.
I believe in your co-partner, former defensive coordinator Bill Bush, same thing. I mean, like Colton Feast would have helped this team. And yeah, I just, you wish they could have worked it out.
I know.
I don't know what happened there. I really don't, because Colton could have helped this team this year. But maybe a new staff, year one, they want to go in a new direction.
So yeah, Lenhart could be very valuable this spring. But it just, all you got to do if you're watching this is read that chart. They're light. That's one thing I've been saying since December is they need numbers up front. They didn't really get
280-pound plus bodies.
Yeah, and they didn't really get it. That's the one thing I'd say about their talent acquisition on both sides of the line. I don't think they did a great job on either side of bolstering it,
because it's hard.
Well, it is hard.
I mean, it's really difficult to find quality linemen in the portal.
Yeah, because there's just not that many 6'4", 310-pound guys walking around.
Everybody wants those guys.
Yeah. I mean, you go to Super Saver, how many guys do you see they're 6'4", 300 that can move? Zero.
You might see guys that are 280, but they can't move very well.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's move down the line here on the defense here as we move through. You got linebackers and kind of edge, and we know the inside linebackers. Nick Henrich is out for the spring.
Yes, he is.
But we know what he is. We know what Luke Reimer is. But what we do know is those guys have been injury prone, Steve Sipple.
Yeah.
And what we don't know is MJ Sherman. Like, what is his true role? Now, he told me they're going to move him around. Mm-hmm. So he could
help.
I think in this 3-3-5 Tony White world, he's just a movable matchup part where they're going to move him to the edge, the linebacker, all over. And that's what we don't really know. When I talk about defining positions right now, where do those guys factor in?
Right. We don't know. There's the inside linebacker picture is really interesting. Yeah, it's Reimer and Henrich. As you stated, Sean, they're both injury prone. Reimer, I think, is the best player on defense, though. When he's healthy, I don't think they have a better defender than Luke Reimer because of what he gives you sideline to sideline, right? Sideline to sideline player.
Oh yeah, it just
he's all over.
His body just kind of struggled.
Well, now what I would tell you about that is they're both a little undersized for the Big Ten, so that's why it's hard to stay healthy. Nick's not the world's best athlete either. So there's a lot of strain he's putting on his body all the time, right? Because he's not as naturally gifted as some guys physically, he has to strain. And that can take a toll, especially when you're a little undersized. Now, the guys that you really watch here, Garrett Snodgrass is a junior. Then you have those sophomores that it's time now. But it's time. Randolph Kapai, Micaiah Gaber, and Seth Malcolm. Time. Gotta go. You gotta start. They got to start working themselves into a position where they can go in a game and be not just stopgap players, but they can make plays. You got to have guys that can make plays.
Yeah, and if they don't put themselves in the conversation this spring, you just wonder what is their long-term outlook in this program. It's a fair question. Yeah. As you look forward to this team, but you know, I'm intrigued. You'll have the freshman Maverick Noonan. We're talking about edge guys now.
Edge guys,
but
yeah.
Noonan will be here. Princewell, Emmanuelin will be here.
Okay.
So those are two guys that will be here this spring that will get a clear picture. Jake Applegate. I love Jake Applegate coming out of high school.
As a guy you watch now, you start watching that.
Will he factor in this year? And there's another Applegate, by the way, at Southeast as a freshman. So like that family just keeps growing football players. And I believe he's the youngest of the crew. Blaze Gunnerson, Jamari Butler, Chief Borders, Kai Whalen. You got 4 edge guys there. Are some of those guys defensive lineman type guys that can play at least defensive end?
Well, I will tell you this: Jamari Butler's not big enough to go into the interior. Now, see, if they're playing now, it gets to be a little bit involved. If they're truly in a 3-3-5, you obviously don't need as many defensive linemen, big defensive linemen. So maybe that's what kind of they're banking on. I don't know. I'll tell you what, Butler and Gunnerson are gigantic. They were sufficient last year. They got to be better than sufficient. Chief Borders, unknown. Kai Whalen, unknown. Sherman, largely unknown. A lot of unknown, but I would say a lot of potential. When I look at it, I'm not really, I don't have major concerns, except I would say this: those guys they lost. I mean, they lost a second-team All Big Ten player in
Nelson.
Yeah, in Nelson Garrett,
Tanner.
And they lost a second-team All Big 12 player in O'Shawn Mathis. O'Shawn Mathis.
Oh, you're talking about O'Shawn Mathis,
yeah,
Big 12.
Second-team All Big 12. You know, in his previous life. And then they lost Caleb Tanner, who played
5 years.
Yeah, played 5 years and played 56 games.
And Ernest Hausman.
Yeah, and lost Ernest Hausman as an inside
pretty dang
guy.
good football player.
They those 4 guys those are pretty significant losses. O'Shawn Mathis, say what you want about him. He got invited to the combine. Garrett Nelson should have gotten invited to the combine. You were talking about him like he could make an NFL roster. And Caleb, now listen, Sean, I'm going to tell you something about Caleb Tanner. Don't be surprised if he's on an NFL roster next year. Played out of position at Nebraska. Played with his hand down at 220. Sean, play with his hand down at 220. He's not going to play with his hand down in the NFL. They're going to they'll make him an inside linebacker, maybe a Sam. And I bet he makes a roster. I know that's going out on a limb, but I'm just illustrating what they lost, which is quite a bit. They lost quite a bit there.
Now, MJ Sherman could really answer a lot of questions and help shore up some things. He could be a difference maker.
Oh yeah.
They need him to be a difference maker.
Yeah.
They need.
And the question was with MJ Sherman, has he regained, he suffered a knee injury in high school. And the question at Georgia was, could he ever regain all his explosiveness? Now that's what you watch. What's the explosion look like?
All right. Lastly, secondary, and I think we both agree that this might be the deepest position.
No, we do agree.
Isaac Gifford, starting level player. Javin Wright has played snaps. You go down the line. Yeah. Tommy Hill has been a starter. He's back at defensive back.
Got a lot of guys here. They're good.
Quentin Newsome, longtime starter. Tyreek Johnson, not a factor. Braxton Clark has played some. Omar Brown, but then you got Miles Farmer and Marquise Buford. I mean, you've got a lot of material, and then obviously the young freshman from a year ago at corner, Malcolm Hartstock.
Yeah, and you heard Evan Cooper tell us on this show that he's coaching Quentin Newsome like he's an NFL player right now. Okay, Quentin Newsome's going to play in the NFL, so you got an NFL corner. You heard Evan Cooper effusive in his praise of Malcolm Hartsock. He said those are the tough kid, fast, ball hawk. He said those are the kind of, he said of Hartsock, those are the kind of kids you need to win. Their corners are good. Tommy Hill back at corner. So that Tommy Hill gets beat out by Malcolm Hartzog last year.
Could he play safety though?
I suppose, yeah.
I mean, I think that's what we like.
Yeah,
we asked Evan Cooper this on the Husker Headline show a couple weeks ago, and he's like, he's a defensive back.
See, I don't know if you're Tommy Hill. I don't know where you want to make a run at it. Could you make a run at it corner, getting your old job back, or do you dip into that safety pool, which is pretty deep? It's a deeper pool at safety, Sean. I mean, look at who they got back at safety. Farmer Buford leads the way.
And there's some wild cards there, like Kanoa Paul Gates, like with a fresh start via factor.
Deshaun Single.
What about Kane Williams?
Yeah, Williams.
Corey Collier. I mean, yeah, there's some tough decisions on that back end.
I think there will be. I like Farmer. I mean, I really like the way Farmer started tackling in the box. He went from sort of a suspect tackler to a really good tackler in the box, sure tackler.
So we're going to be talking lots of secondary here over the course of spring because there's definitely some intrigue
a lot there
with that group. All right, when we come back, Abby Barmore is going to join us. We're going to take your spring football questions in the mailbag. You're listening here to the Husker Online Show. And we're back here on the Husker Online Show. Sean Callahan, Steve Sipple, Abby Barmore joining us here on this special spring football preview edition of the show, which means we have a spring football mailbag. Abby, what do you have? Oh, hold on. All right, you're on now. Sorry about that, Abby.
We have a lot of questions today. So our first one is, who is the best player on either side of the ball right now?
Luke Reimer on defense. I think that's pretty defined.
You could make a case for Quentin Newsome.
Okay. I'm with you on that. Yeah, absolutely.
And maybe Ty Robinson.
Yeah, I'd say.
On value.
Yeah. No, you got him. You got the two, Luke Reimer and Quentin. I'm glad you threw in Quentin Newsome, especially in the context of Evan Cooper.
Who you taking to Big Ten media?
Hold on. Especially in the context of Evan Cooper saying he's training him like he's in the NFL right now. Who do you take in the Big Ten media? That doesn't always tell you who the best is.
Is Newsome going back again? It is red.
Good.
Gary Michaels.
I'm a huge Newsome fan. I mean, huge. I think he's a good corner. And he's an intent corner. He's a good leader. He's a leader by example. He does everything extra. You should, if you're a Nebraska fan, you should feel very lucky that you have those two corners, Newsome and Hartzog.
Offense is a very tough question.
Now I'm going Anthony Grant. You got to top it. I don't try. Who's better than Anthony Grant?
Well, based on his production at a Power 5 program, Billy Kemp.
Okay.
He's had
Fair.
2 70+ yard reception seasons, which would be two of the best in Nebraska's program history.
That's fair.
So, like, if you're just going off what he did before, now, granted, he was nicked up and had the tragedy with his friends. Last year.
No, that's a fair.
You can't look at last year for Billy Kemp because of the tragedy and then some of the situation with his injury there. But the previous 2 years before that, he was a record-breaking receiver.
Yeah, you might have taught me on that one. That Kemp. Now, I would say, I mean, Grant's more of a pure football player, although Kemp's tough. I mean, he's a tough kid, little though, and he doesn't break a lot of tackles. That's
Jeff Sims' stats are pretty good too, as are Casey's. I mean,
yeah, you can make a case for Casey for sure, and Sims. You're right. Grant is a suspect pick. It is. You might have taught me with Kemp. Thank you.
What do you have next, Abby?
What non-returning starters do you think will emerge during spring ball and be talked about as potential big contributors in the fall?
AJ Allen. I think AJ Allen could. This is embarrassing. I think AJ Allen could overtake Grant, who I just said was the best player.
What about Xavier Betts?
Don't laugh, Abby.
What about Xavier Betts?
Oh, I long shot on that in that conversation.
Like, you don't.
Although no, you're right. As a guy that
plays,
emerges as a non-starter. Yeah,
he wasn't on the team last year.
Yeah.
I mean, when we get a chance to talk to Xavier, it'll be interesting what he tells you. Like, what did he do for the last year?
Yeah. Oh, another guy that you'd look. He did start a few games or one is Latovsky. Henry Latovsky, I think, is going to be a very good offensive lineman before he leaves here.
Blaze Gunnerson.
Yeah, Gunnerson, Butler, they're two guys on defense that you wonder about. Maybe could make that big jump, but I think we covered that.
Well, and just based on kind of the moment, Omar Brown.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
no, thank you for saying that.
Looked like he had a pretty good winter. I mean, he's carrying 6'9", 330-pound lineman on his back.
Right. And back issues have held him back. now, and now he's carrying Teddy Prohaska on his back.
Thinking about the back.
No, it's an incredible.
The back injuries he suffered, and he's carrying Teddy Prohaska.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think Thomas Fidoni's a big one too that you guys are missing.
Yeah.
I think we're just assuming he's going to start though, because he's been hurt the last 2 years. Like,
yeah, I think that's a big one though.
Year.
I mean, what I hope.
Well, he's hurt last year.
Yeah.
What I hope for Nebraska fans' sake and for Fidoni's sake and for Satterfield's sake is that he is what we think he is, which is a guy that could be like an all Big Ten type. Okay, I got to hold off a little bit on all Big Ten coming out of the gate.
A difference maker.
Yeah, a difference maker coming out of the gate. Yeah.
5 players to pay attention to this spring.
Jeez. I'll say MJ Sherman.
Yeah, we just got to name all the portal guys.
Well, MJ Sherman and Arik Gilbert, I think, are up there.
How about Fidoni? You got to say Fidoni.
Fidoni.
You got to say Jeff Sims.
Jeff Sims.
Okay, where are we at?
That's 4. Elijah Judy.
I'm saying Elijah Judy because they need him to be good.
Oh my God, they need that guy.
Yeah, Judy. I don't know that if I were a coach, if I were Tony White, that I would say that to him explicitly, but he might. And I would probably be subtle in displaying to him the urgency with which they need him to play and play well immediately. I don't think you say that to him like, hey, look at our depth chart. My God, we need you bad. I wouldn't do that, but I'd be a little subtle about it.
Well, they have a pretty good read. Number 1, he's a Philly guy. And number 2, he played at A&M for a former Matt Rule assistant coach.
Yeah, we don't know much about
so they have a good read on what they got.
They got a good read. I wish to God we could watch a scrimmage and see what that looks like.
Next question.
Do you think we'll see many true position changes this spring?
Undetermined. I mean, I think it'd be really premature for us to start saying, oh, this guy's going to move to here and that guy's going to move to there. I think they don't even know. They need to probably see it and what they have before those decisions are made. But, when would those position moves happen, and
how profound? I mean, how big is the change? Is it just a corner going to safety, or is it a guy switching sides?
Other than like Cody Glenn going from running back to linebacker, like what have been some of the other real successful ones over the years?
I don't know. You don't even see it very often.
But the Cody Glenn one,
that was huge.
I mean, like
that was huge.
That was like when Bo Pelini was in his defensive prime, just like, yep, linebacker.
Yeah, they switched Eric Martin from like a stand-up linebacker to a rush-in defensive.
And he had
end.
like 10 sacks.
Yeah, 8.5. He had 8.5 sacks. That Eric Martin back, I want to say 211-ish.
He was all Big Ten.
Yeah, Eric Martin was one they switched up, but you don't see it. You don't see it very often at this level because those guys have pretty defined roles. They recruit them to have defined roles.
Next question.
What position group will you be paying the most attention to this spring?
Ooh, there's a question. Quarterback. No. I won't play.
Quarterback's obvious, though.
I feel running back. I always pay attention to running back, but that Allen, AJ Allen, Grant, Ramir Johnson, Gabe Irvin, all that, those guys battling that hard. And then does somebody come out of there and say, I'm just going to get lost here. I'm out. That you wonder about that because they are so deep there. So that's what I'm watching. That's what I'm really watching.
On defense,
yeah, on defense,
I just want to see like how they define these parts and these roles because there's so many undefined pieces to this defense because of the scheme change.
Yeah. Hey, would you counsel people not to get too hung up on where a guy's playing? I mean, I understand what you're saying, but don't get like, I don't know that it'll be always so defined who's playing where because they're going to move a lot of guys around.
I mean, it's kind of chaos what they do. I mean, they're going to move people around to create chaos.
Yeah, you want to say who's your nickels? Well, in some situations it would be player X, and others it might be another player.
All right, Abby, I think we have time for one more.
All right, our final question. Over your years of covering Nebraska football, who has been some of the players that have emerged the most during the spring and made a big impact in the fall?
I'll throw one out first. And I know you got a really good one, Sid, but my one on this, I'll say Roy Halou. When Bo Pelini got here in 2008, it just kind of was assumed that Marlon Lucky was going to, be the guy. He had a 1,000-yard year in 2007 and, like 5-star recruit. And so they got a returning 1,000-yard back. Well, the new Pelini staff with Tim Beck running the running backs room and Sean Watson's still there. they really fell in love with Roy Halou.
Yeah.
And I think in 2007, you would have never have known that Roy Halou was going to be what he became the next couple of years to then become an NFL running back. But you saw Roy Halou in the spring of 2008 take the starting running back job from a back that had 1,000 yards the year before in Marlon Lucky.
I totally agree. That's a good one, Sean. And the guy I really remember is Stuart Bradley. Was kind of an unknownish walk-on, but a really good-looking player. I mean, he was a big, long linebacker and had a huge spring game.
Just hit the crap out of
you. Oh, God, did he hit the crap out. And then he became a good NFL player, but he was lost. And then all of a sudden in that one spring, which I don't even remember exactly what year it was.
2002 or 3.
Okay, yeah, 2003. You're right, Sean.
Bo Pelini's first spring.
Sean's got a freaky memory. And you remember that spring game, he put a wallop on somebody near the goal line. And he emerged.
But it was like 3s on 3s. It wasn't like 1s on 1s. But he would, and when the 2s and the 3s were out there, he was just crushing guys.
He was. And then he got good. I mean, became an NFL player.
And then, okay, the all-timer, though.
The all-timer, numero uno, Abby, on the list is Zach Taylor. One of the biggest stories in the spring that's ever happened in the last 20 years here, right?
I mean, that kind of like started his rise.
2005, it did start his rise
to where he's at today. I mean, the perseverance, the toughness. He took in a live scrimmage in 2005, like 8 or 10 sacks in a scrimmage.
Yeah, he was getting whomped.
He had the flu.
Yeah, and they let it go. I mean, they let him play.
It was a 3.5 hour scrimmage.
And they didn't put green on. I mean, he was not in green, right?
No.
And remember, he interviewed us. He interviewed them with the media afterwards, as did Bill. And Bill made it clear, boy, Zach Taylor. I mean, Bill was effusive in his praise of Zach, the way his toughness that day. That's a great point, Sean. That was in spring of 2005. And that was sort of the start of the emergence of Zach Taylor.
He ran, it was like a 180 play scrimmage. You know, a normal scrimmage is like 100. That's a good. And so it was like the length of 2 scrimmages. And the offense was so bad in 2004 with Joe Daly. They couldn't do what Bill wanted to do. That finally they were doing it with, and like,
it was exciting.
Like he did not want that practice to end.
It was an exciting time.
Like we sat in the bleachers, and it was like we got over there at like 10. We didn't get out of there till like 2.
No, it was an exciting little time in Nebraska football history. It was. And that 2005 team was all right. I mean, that's the team that went to the Alamo Bowl.
They beat Michigan.
And Zach was good.
They kind of ended Gary Barnett's career at Colorado. I mean, then Gary Barnett got beat by Vince Young in the Big 12 title game. He got fired.
And then, of course, in 2006, Zach was the Big 12 Player of the Year, and they went to the Cotton Bowl, went to the Big 12 championship game, and one of the most memorable games that I've covered at Arrowhead, when they had a great chance to beat Oklahoma. I mean, it wasn't like, oh, Nebraska's just happy.
60,000 Nebraska fans there.
Yeah, it wasn't like Nebraska's just happy to be here. They just couldn't get it done in the red zone. They couldn't get it. They couldn't get it on the other. When they got to the other side of the field, they couldn't get anything done.
That grass in Arrowhead, it was like concrete. It was so cold.
Yeah,
it was just a frozen. There was no. It was just. I'll never forget that. And how everyone that went to that game tells me still to this day. And we were there. We were in the press box. But how cold it was.
What am I talking about, by the way? Did you remember the game? What I'm talking about is it seemed like Nebraska.
They were across the 40 like the whole game.
And they just couldn't get anything done.
Like they were in like Oklahoma territory.
Yeah, a lot.
And they were in this like purgatory between the 30 and the 40.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
And
so not red zone, really. They couldn't get in the red zone.
They're fringe, and they didn't have a kicker.
Yeah. Oh, that's right.
Jordan Congdon could make like 30-yard field goals. So that was it, you know, and
yeah, he was an accurate short.
You had Alex Henry, by the way, on the sidelines that year, red shirt and just hanging out. You know, they could have just played Alex Henry.
That was a crushing loss for Bill. He took it really hard.
Well, the Cotton Bowl too. They were up 14-3, and they had control of that game. Yeah. And they had control of the Oklahoma State game that year.
Yeah,
and they should have won. They should have won the Texas game. Terrence Dunn fumbles a first down that would have won the game.
Yeah,
they had 4 losses that year that all could have been wins. USC was the one that obviously they lost by, I think they lost by 18 points, 28-10.
Yeah.
In LA. But the other 4 losses that year, they could have won all those games.
Now, somebody on one of our listeners might say, Sipple, come on. You can't remember anybody from the Osborne era. There are probably guys that really came on in the spring. I just can't remember.
There just weren't as many surprises, I felt like, back then. Like, you just kind of knew those teams so well.
Yeah, that's part of it.
It was hard for like freshmen to play back then and young guys. I mean, you had to be an older guy.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's why when Amon Green got here in '95,
he got here in August, right?
It was kind of an anomaly that he played that much. I mean, that was not common.
No, it was very memorable.
And it took like Lawrence Phillips, with his legal situation and other things that happened for him to get on the field.
Do you remember it though? I remember them practicing on the grass fields north.
No, I would have been in ninth grade in '95.
Okay. So I remember. See, Sean, I want to illustrate something we talked about earlier in the show about watching practice. Here's how it went back then. It was August, and he was working with the ones, and I was like standing on the field. I don't know, like Frank let us be out there for a period or something. I'm like, that's Amon Green working with the ones.
Yeah, he was the real deal.
Yeah, he was. And then, but I do remember Frank telling us, look, you guys can't be here this early. But we used to see a lot. We used to see a lot more than we do now. A lot more.
Or you'd go once a week too. There'd always be one day a week you go.
Yeah.
And at least eyeball the team.
Yeah.
And that's gone away. But
yeah, I maybe I could talk to him and say, can we just come the first 10 minutes every day? And then what happened with Osborne? He would say, yeah, you guys can come the first or the last. He'd say, you can come the last 10 minutes. But what would happen? We'd start pushing it. We'd come with a half hour left. God dang, I saw so much practice back in the day because Tom would come over and say, you guys are a little too early. You need to knock it back. So we would for a while. And then a few days would pass. And we go back
you've ruined it for everybody.
Yeah.
That's what you're saying.
We go back to a half hour.
All right. When we come back, we'll close the show. We're going to talk some Big Ten football spring storylines. You're listening here to the Husker Online Show. And we're back here on the Husker Online Show. Final segment here of the spring football preview show. Sean Callahan, Steve Sipple, as we talk some spring practice around the Big Ten. Nebraska's kind of right with most of the programs. April 22nd is kind of your most common spring date. You've got a few that are going to take place on the 29th at Maryland and Rutgers. Michigan, they're like already done with spring. They're going to be done on April 1.
Yeah, they started February 20th.
Yeah. So they'll be the first one, but I'm intrigued about Iowa.
Yeah.
For a lot of reasons.
Okay.
Because of kind of the off the field stuff, but then they have Cade McNamara there as the quarterback. And I think a lot of their problems, you can say it's Brian Ferentz all you want. They haven't had good quarterback play. They've had some of the worst quarterback play Iowa's had, the last couple of years with what they, with Petrus and the guys they brought. So what will they look like with a new quarterback?
With a new quarterback, and will these distractions with a settlement on the racial discrimination.
The players probably don't even pay attention. I mean,
coaches do though. It affected the coaches, and that can be an issue, but probably not a big one with someone as grounded and weathered this Kirk, for instance, had to weather a lot of storms, and has always done pretty well. So that's interesting. You have a lot of, you have new coaches in the league too. You have starting with Wisconsin. So that's interesting. Illinois, interesting. Purdue, interesting. You got new guys.
Yeah, Luke Fickell at Wisconsin.
Not Illinois, by the way. Purdue.
He brought in 3 transfer quarterbacks. So what's that going to look like? Mm-hmm. And will Wisconsin still be Wisconsin?
That's the question.
Are they going to gimmick it up a little bit with what they do on off? Are they going to get away from being like truly who they are, or will Luke Fickell
make them look like everybody else?
Yeah, and that's
kind of that, right? That's kind of what it boils down to. Is Wisconsin just going to look like everybody else now? Iowa doesn't look like everybody else. Wisconsin and Iowa don't look like everybody else. But is Wisconsin going to start gravitating away from that, right? That's what you wonder.
Then you've got Penn State, a new quarterback after Sean Clifford's 10-year career came to a close. Sean Clifford had been there forever.
Yeah.
Like, you think about
6 years. Yes,
Trace McSorley, we were there in, was it 2017? Mm-hmm. I want to say Clifford started from 2018 after
6 years,
2018 all the way to 2022.
Yeah. He's a 6-year player. So, they'll look different, but Penn State, they're loaded.
Drew Aller, a former 5-star, will be the starting quarterback or projected to start for Penn State.
Big arm guy. Big arm, not like Clifford didn't have a big arm. This guy's got a big arm.
And I felt Clifford limited Penn State. This will be interesting because McSorley really brought them up to their highest level under James Franklin.
They just won 11 games, Sean.
They did, but they still don't beat Michigan and Ohio State.
It's true, but they won 11. Clifford was a lightning rod. I mean, he was. But if I'm Sean Clifford, I'm saying, well, I mean, isn't 11 games good enough for you? That's pretty good, right?
Brett Bielema, Illinois. Yeah, they had the fewest amount of players in the Big Ten that went in the transfer portal.
Is that right?
So like their culture in Champaign is solid. And what is year 3 for Bielema look like?
Yeah. Well, I mean, boy, you look at the Big Ten West, and you won't be able to look at it much longer, but you can still look at the Big Ten West. And once you say it is wide open.
Last year, the West probably.
This could be the last year of the West
before they kind of go with the made for TV schedules. I mean, that's what's going to be going on. I mean, like they're going to the new scheduling is going to be kind of TV based.
I don't know who you'd identify as the favorite right now in the West. Would it have to be Illinois?
God, I don't know. I really don't. I mean,
there's nothing obvious.
I mean, Nebraska could break right and contend for the West. Minnesota. I mean, there's you could make a case for anybody in the West right now,
except probably Northwestern.
Yeah, Northwestern. And
hit the skids.
They had another coach leave. Like what? So what's going on there? I mean, I think the portal era is just destroyed Northwestern because you can't just take transfers at Northwestern.
Right. That's got to be a big. You're right, Sean. That's got to be a huge challenge for them.
That school. If you're coming from a school with normal average grades, and they're just not going to let you get a Northwestern degree. You have to meet the academic criteria. And that's, places like Notre Dame, Stanford, Vanderbilt, Northwestern. That's the one challenge I think they face in this portal era is how do they, upgrade the rosters when the rules are different for them?
It's really, really challenging. So, yeah, I mean, you look around, there's a lot. I mean, it's very intriguing. It's Michigan. Michigan's really intriguing. Can they repeat? I mean, Ohio State's got a ton back, but as you mentioned, the quarterback situation is unsolved. So there's a lot to look at. Spring. Now, here's the thing about spring, though, Sean. It's not quite what it used to be in terms of importance and intrigue because the rosters still change after the spring, right? You can spend a lot of time if you want learning a team's roster and then go back in August. Oh, well, they lost those guys, So I mean, it's college football is kind of odd now. It's not quite like it used to be. Those magazines that come out in the summer, they got to wait to publish a long time, right? I mean, you might be reading one of those summer magazines that come out, Athlon.
They try to get them out Memorial Day weekend.
Yeah. I mean, there's still player movement sometimes.
I think you and I are about the only people that still buy those things.
I don't. I think people buy them. I love them. I think I still have one sitting on my kitchen table.
Phil Steele's, though, it comes out so late now because he waits for everything.
Waits for all the movement. Waits for all the player movement.
All right. I want to close on Maryland. I think they're intriguing because Tagovailoa's back.
Yeah.
Mike Locksley kind of got it going last year.
Absolutely.
He's got now, listen to his offensive coaches now. His offensive coordinator is Josh Gaddis. His co-offensive coordinator, associate head coach is Kevin Sumlin.
Yeah.
That's pretty formidable.
Got some offensive minds there.
I mean, they have a very big staff. I mean, that's a big time staff.
Yeah,
they come to Lincoln.
Yeah, Maryland will not be easy. Somebody asked on our chat a good question. Which game
is tougher?
The Minnesota game to start the season or Maryland coming? Probably Minnesota, but not by much.
Nebraska will have the element of surprise against Minnesota.
True.
Like if they can utilize the beginning of the game to get them off balance, that's how they win that game.
Yeah. Absolutely.
PJ Fleck wants to jump up on you and bleed the clock.
Right. Absolutely. That's a good point, Sean. That's a great advantage for Nebraska potentially.
And PJ Fleck always got up on Nebraska. Finally, they got up on him this year in Lincoln, and then they just weren't able to capitalize. The offenses kind of went stale, and then the defense was on the field too much because of that. And it
kind of goes back to our conversation about what we can see in practice. I don't know. I mean, the element of surprise can be diminished by a lot of media reports from practice. It can. Coaches read that stuff.
Well, and
they scour it.
And here especially.
Yeah.
Like in Madison, there's like 2 people that might go to practice. Yeah. Here, there'd be 40.
Yeah. So now going back to that original conversation, if your rule, you're probably tightening it up. Element of surprise is important.
All right. Well, it should be fun. Spring practice starts Monday, March 20th. So hopefully everyone's enjoying this kind of down week, spring break week here around UNL and around Lincoln Public Schools. And we'll have plenty of spring practice coverage on HuskerOnline.com. So if you're not a member, make sure you subscribe, join. $29.99 get you access through August 31st. Also, like and follow us here on the YouTube page. Or if you don't have time to watch us, you can download this same very show on anywhere you find podcasts. Just simply type in Husker Online.